But what we'll look at now is this other concept, which is spacing. So timing is basically the when. You can think of timing as the beat, the rhythm. It's usually measured in seconds or frames, but spacing is a little bit harder to define, okay? Spacing is the how. And the most common ways that things move, the three basic patterns are speeding up, slowing down, or constant. They just go at the same speed. So I want to look at how we could create those different spacing patterns, and then you'll be able to see how to change them, how to manipulate them. Okay. So if there's no acceleration or deceleration, we would call that constant movement, so that the object would move the same distance every frame, and it wouldn't look like gravity anymore. So I'm going to go to Windows up at the top here, Animation Editors, and I'm going to grab the graph editor and open this up. Okay. So what we have right now is something that looks kind of like a bell curve, right? So it's a smooth connection between these points. You can see that in the graph editor, there's a timeline. Just like I could go here and I could scrub, go left and right, I can do that in the graph editor. I can go back and forth. And we can see our keys. Each little point correlates to those red tick marks. So I have 3 keys, I have 3 points, okay? And if I grab a point by just selecting or tapping on it, it will tell me what frame number it's on, and it will tell me what the value is. We're looking at a rotation. So I can see over here, oh, that's frame 1, it's minus 45. There's frame 13, that's 45. So I can double check, right? So I can change the numbers. You can also grab a point, and if you grab the point and switch over to your move tool, hit W for the move tool, then you can move this point. You can move it up or down. That changes the rotation. You can also move it left or right. So that changes the timing, right? So this means it's on a different frame. So if you're not careful, you can be really sloppy and move stuff around. Usually you want to be a little bit more controlled with how you're moving stuff around. So if you hold down Shift when you're moving stuff, it's much more controlled. If you hold down Shift and go up and down, it will only go up and down. If you hold down Shift and go left and right, it will only go left and right. So right now, without Shift, it's very loose and organic. I can do whatever I want. But as soon as I hold down Shift and then I use a middle mouse button to click and drag, it will move that point only up and down. So it's a lock, right? Shift acts as a lock. If I hold down Shift, use my middle mouse button, and then drag left and right, it only goes left and right, but not up and down. So it gives you more control. And that way, you know, I'm staying on the same frame. And then I can see that this point has been changed. I'm just going to type it back to 45. If you wanted that to be on a different frame, you could type that in here too. So you know what? I want that to be on frame 5, right? So you can just enter in numbers just like an Excel sheet in some ways, right? So the numbers are there. If you want to change them, you can just change them. I'll put that one back. Okay. When you expand the graph editor, there's going to be icons here that you might not be able to see if the graph editor is a really small window. Okay. And I'm going to, if I just tap on a curve, right, or just drag, select, now the whole curve is highlighted. And these are tangent types. If anyone has worked with software like Adobe Illustrator or Flash, anything that's vector based, some of this will be familiar. So with vector software, when you're drawing, you're creating these points and lines, and each point has a handle, and the handle you use to shape the curve, right? So it's the same tool that you use in Illustrator when you're just drawing with vector tools. So you can change the rules, right? The tangents are basically the rules. How does the computer connect one dot to another dot? And you're just changing the rules to see how the curve will change shape. So if I get the whole curve highlighted and click on this one, the one right here, this is linear tangents. So if I click on that one, now what happens is everything is connected with a straight line. So what does that look like? Well, if I hit the play button, linear looks like, okay? So an abrupt change, click, 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 right? Just from one side to the next. It doesn't speed up or slow down. Auto tangent is the default. Auto tangent is what we got for free when we were just making keys. This is what Maya's default setting is it created that bell curve that we saw at the beginning. And for each one of these videos, I have a screen capture of the graph. Okay, so this is linear. This is auto tangent. What's for homework is we're going to add our own custom key to change the bell curve to something more interesting. So it feels a little bit more like a stronger acceleration. Okay, more about that in a second. But there's linear, auto tangent, the stuff we're gonna do for homework. And then here what I did is I changed the timing. I took this point and moved it over here. All right. And you can see the result of that is this. So now it takes less time to get to one side. So that's going to feel stronger than the other one. So it feels like a push. And the only thing that I did was change the timing. I didn't change the values. All the numbers are the same, right? The points are the same, but it's just how quickly, how few frames it takes. So I took something that was balanced, right? That was rocking back and forth the same, but I made one swing shorter. So now that has much more impact, much more acceleration. So that feels stronger. And you could do the same thing, but on the other side and make the one side feel like now it's being pulled, right? So you get like a push and a pull. So let me just go back to auto. What we're going to do is we're going to go to frame 5, right? And we'll sort of make this a little bit smaller. There. I'm going to hit S, right? So it just gives me a key. And you can see that I get a key here and I get a dot in the graph editor, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to move this key closer to where we're coming from. All right. And the idea is that what we're trying to do is we're trying to change this so that this line is a little steeper. Before you can see it's kind of got like a tilt like this. If I move this point down, right, now it's going to be a bit steeper. And when I hit play, it's a little subtle. You may not notice it, but hopefully it feels like it's a bit of a push right now. It feels like swinging to the right is a little bit more energy to it, a little bit more acceleration than going back. And that's because, well, I haven't mirrored this. So on this side, if I look at the number, I don't really need that many decimals. Let's just call it -37. Okay. So that's good. Now I got my point. Then I would look and see, well, how many frames is that? Well, that's 1, 2, 3, 4 frames. Okay. So I go to this side and then count 1, 2, 3, 4, hit S. And then that one should be 37, right? This point and this point are the same. It's the same time, 4 frames from the extreme, 4 frames from the other extreme. The only thing that's different is the sign. That's a negative and that's a positive. So let's hit play. Okay, so it just changes the feel of it just to be a little bit stronger. And you can experiment with this. Let's see what would happen. If I push this all the way to it being a flat line, let's test that and see, is it not going to move? Let's see what happens. Ah, okay, right. So now we're looking at, okay, if it's exactly the same, then it holds. That doesn't feel like gravity, right? It stops. So then the whole question is, okay, well, how much can I sort of just nudge this just a little, right? Until I get something that, okay, does it still feel like gravity, right? And if I move it too high up, right? So it's like this, then it starts to look just like we had before, as if I didn't have these points, right? It looks like the bell curve. So somewhere in that range from locking it to having the bell curve is where the animator lives. And you'll keep pushing it to a point where, okay, I'm happy with that. It seems okay, believable. I'm not trying to fool physicists. I never will. I'm trying to fool a general audience. I'm trying to fool myself. So does that feel like it's better, more interesting, stronger acceleration than the other one? And like I mentioned before, if I take this point and I just move it over, now it's asymmetric, right? So this may not work for a pendulum, but that would be really nice for a hammer. right? So you can like, okay, that's a really sharp impact. How many frames is that versus that? So all I'm doing is just changing how many frames it takes to get over there. So it allows you to experiment with something really simple.